A low mechanical voice echoed somewhere, distant and warped. Warning, warning. Thesara stirred. Her limbs were stiff, her mind thick with static. Everything ached, especially her right side. Her head throbbed like a slow percussion, each beat of pain dragging her further from unconsciousness. Proximity alert. A dim red light pulsed in time with the voice. Her optics fluttered open, blurry and sluggish. Lines of text and flickering symbols raced across a narrow display to her right that felt foreign. A small screen was in front of her, with stripes and shapes zooming by. Collision course. Proximity alert. Collision. Had there been a collision? What had happened after leaving Cybertron? Warning. Warning. Thrusters inoperative. Proximity alert. Collision course. Collision course? Thesara rubbed her optics and held her throbbing head for a moment, trying to piece it all together. The voice sounded closer. She looked around her to find a cramped, closet-like area with a harness attached to her shoulders. An escape pod. An escape pod? From where? She thought. Escape pod? From the medical transport. That's right, she was on the final medical transport to have left Cybertron. Then what? Collision imminent. Brace for impact, the voice said. Brace for impact? Still groggy, Thesara looked up and saw that the screen in front of her was actually a viewport where she could see out into space. The shapes and stripes had been stars and the moon she was about to hit. No time to think, no time to react, only instinct. She pulled the harness tighter across her frame and curled slightly into herself. A moment of stillness, then impact. A thunderous crash. Metal shrieked. The world jolted sideways. Everything turned white, then black again, and she fell back into the dark. Hello, can you hear me? The voice was unfamiliar, but not threatening. It was calm and gentle. Can you open your optics? Thesara tried, but they felt impossibly heavy. Her head throbbed dully, worse than before. Unless, had that been a dream? The crash, the stars, the pod? It's all right, the voice said again, softer now. I'll get you out. Just try to relax. The words settled over her like a thermal field. Reassured, her system stopped resisting. She let herself drift, and this time, when darkness came, it was warm. A voice, warm and steady, stirred her from the fog. Thesara, can you hear me? She tried to respond, but her optics still felt heavy. The voice reached her again, closer this time. That's it. You'll be all right. Can you look at me? She forced her optics open, blinking through the blur. Light stung, and the sky moved downward as the ground climbed up. A wave of vertigo swept over her. She shut her optics quickly, groaning. You were in a pretty bad wreck back there, and you're injured. We'll get you help. Don't worry, he said. Closing her optics did not remove the vertigo, as she recalled the motion of the stars shrinking by the window and the moon growing closer. Do you remember what happened? Her thoughts felt slow, like her memory was scattered. As she searched for it, she noticed the air smelled foreign. She reached inward, focusing. She was waiting for him. Then, after goodbye, they separated. Was he okay? Had his ship also been struck? Struck. They were struck. They were struck by the nearby explosion of a ship. The exodus was chaotic, and as the battle neared, so did the ships that were being targeted. The Decepticons had hit one ship nearby the medical transport and had lost control and collided with the fuel chamber of the transport. The warning had sounded, and only moments later they had felt the explosion. Thesara was still in the rear of the transport, having just seen her brother. As the ship exploded, she was somehow fortunate enough to have been in a small section that was spared from the complete destruction or incineration. Instead, she was adrift and injured far from the battle as the section drifted into space. She regained consciousness and awareness just long enough to enter one of the escape pods that had been in the section she was tumbling along with. As she entered it, it must have registered that she was injured and placed her into stasis, or perhaps she just lost consciousness. I have to go back, she thought as deep concern filled her spark for the patients she had been transporting. It was a civilian medical transport ship. They were unarmed and posed no threat to the Decepticons. Why would the Decepticons risk collateral damage to a medical transport ship? Thesara felt her sadness and concern turn to rage. The rage helped rouse her. They killed my patients. she whispered, bitterness sharpening the words. Who did? Said the warm voice, his hand pressing gently on her shoulder. The Decepticons, replied Thesara bitterly. There was a pause. Decepticons? He repeated, uncertain. That stopped her cold. Her optics cracked open again, narrowing now. Who didn't know who the Decepticons were? What Cybertronian needed clarification? She turned her head, forcing her aching frame upright by a few inches. The figure beside her was tall, refined in design, walking with a measured pace beside a hovering field stretcher, towing her down a narrow path. He had an unknown glowing green insignia on his chest and a matching glowing green blade on his back. She felt the increasing pressure of his hand on her shoulder as she tried to sit up a bit to look at him. Was this a dream? She had never seen or known a planet that looked like this. The life was organic. She had heard scientists hypothesize the possibility of such life as being reasonable in the vastness of the universe, but this had to be some hallucination. She had likely died in the explosion. This might be the well of all sparks. What are the odds to have survived an explosion that destroyed an entire ship anyway? As she looked into the face of a Cybertronian, she was at a loss for what to say. Then the words spilled out of her. Who are you? She immediately thought that was rather rude. This person may have either saved her in the living or was retrieving her, recently dead, to help her transition into the next life. He looked at her fully. His eyes were calm and steady. His frame was marked with symbols she didn't recognize. I am Zepharon, Knight of the Temple. Her head throbbed. She let out a small gasp and collapsed back down, clutching her helm. Easy, Zepharon said, gentler now. You should lie still. We're almost there. A healer awaits, Zepharon said. Her optics shut tight, trying to force the throbbing to subside. She responded, What sort of physician? She is not a physician, Thesara. She is a natural healer. Rest now and recover, Zepharon said. What did that mean, natural healer? Was this some ancient ritualistic culture? What planet had she crash-landed on? The process of trying to think through what was going on, whether real or not, was too much for her injured neural circuits. The questions faded into static. And once more, Thesara powered down. Whom have you brought me this time, Zepharon? A voice came from among the vines in the garden. It was measured, melodic, and weathered by centuries. A physician from Cybertron, Zepharon replied. Her escape pod crash-landed on Tombstone Glacier. Valtorus looked up from the cluster of glowing flora in her hands. That moon does seem fond of collecting wreckage, she said dryly, although I have never known it to spare a survivor. Zepharon stepped forward, optics heavy with thought. Yes, the moon has a unique magnetic signature that tends to capture smaller vessels into its gravity well. With harsh terrain and sub-zero conditions, most perish if not recovered quickly, Zepharon responded. Valtorus rose, brushing energon dust from her palms. And this one? She's injured deeply, but alive. The archive listed her as a physician, young yet notably experienced, Zepharon said. Young and experienced. Interesting. Another war on Cybertron, then, evaluating Thesara's injuries. Yes, indeed. The latest peak in hubris in our people's history, Zepharon said sadly. Valtorus walked slowly toward the garden, collecting plants, then back to the Cybertronian resting beneath the shade of the Icona canopy. Well, she will need time here in the garden. If she can put her mind at ease and tranquil her spark, the Icona will respond to her, Valtorus said. There was a moment before Zepharon responded. I think this may be the one, Valtorus. Valtorus stilled. She turned to him, studying his expression. Zepharon was not prone to dramatics. He spoke with measure and with care, but there was also something in his voice. Was it a quiet hope? Valtorus looked at the young Cybertronian on her garden platform. She walked over to her and placed her hand over Thesara's upper shoulder. After several moments, she looked back to Zepharon with curiosity. Well, let me know if you require anything, Valtorus, Zepharon said. Actually, Valtorus said thoughtfully, you may be able to guide her. In a few days' time, I think, she will be strong enough. Zepharon nodded. He brought his right fist to his chest in the silent bow of the knights. Valtorus returned the gesture with a simple nod, then turned back to her work, placing small clusters of luminous plants gently near Thesara's resting form. In the months that followed, Stillknight continued monitoring the humans that interacted with the Autobots closely. They appeared to be the target of Decepticons, and as such, Stillknight felt obligated to keep close watch on them. When in her base, she was exploring more of human technology and trying to integrate it into Cybertronian devices. In reverse engineering some of their devices, she had begun to see different approaches of the inventors that created them. That understanding allowed her to better integrate certain devices over others. Fowler was leaving the Autobot base in an aircraft, which was not out of the ordinary. Before he completed his trip, however, he was intercepted by 2 Decepticon aircraft. Stillknight took flight. She followed their signals until they began to fade. Despite being cloaked, she could still track them, but the signal was somewhat intermittent and corrupted. As she flew through the clouds, she ran into the Decepticon warship. Landing softly atop the ship, she continued monitoring communications. Stillknight deployed several miniature drones and knelt on the bow of the ship, focusing on the sounds she heard. Curiously, there was something familiar within, but she couldn't place it. With the drones taking their places at different levels, she was able to use echolocation to determine where the Cybertronians were and where Fowler was. Choosing the path of least resistance, she activated her portable cloak. As a knight, she could either cloak and observe, or uncloak and fight. It was unacceptable as a knight to fight cloaked. Her mission today was not to take on the Decepticons, it was to rescue Fowler. Each time Stillknight passed the Decepticon insignia, she involuntarily winced and had to deliberately focus to find calm in her spark again. Through the corridors were mostly servant-class Decepticons. As she neared Fowler's location, she found more warrior-class Decepticons. As Fowler's life signs did not appear to be in imminent danger, she waited for someone to enter so the doors would open. She entered after them. She found Fowler bound by the wrists from the ceiling. There were 2 guards in the room. Fowler was in and out of consciousness, but Stillknight waited to act, searching for a moment that her echolocation indicated the most efficient exit possible. The drones had not been detected, and finally, the time came. Stillknight activated the Cybertronian equivalent of an EMP to shut down their cameras and shock the guards. She took Fowler, and the doors opened. Cloaked, she calmly walked down the corridors as more guards went to check the brig. She simply stepped out of their way. It was really quite a straightforward rescue. That is, until a bulkhead dropped in front of her. Another some distance behind her. She did not think she was discovered. It was more likely that they were taking precautions assuming an intruder. Stillknight continued scanning using the drones and their echolocation. As she waited patiently, the bulkhead opened, and warrior-class troopers entered. They scanned around and saw nothing. They walked by her. Then, on their comms, she could hear that all other units also reported clear. Fowler began to awaken in a sleepy stupor. "Open fire," said Megatron's voice over communications. Stillknight first watched them fire away from her. Then they turned and prepared to fire on her position. With the bulkheads open, she took flight. She heard their firing, but she successfully evaded that group of troops. As she flew through the corridors using her echolocation to guide her, she found a Y coming up, with troops at both ends. She transformed and landed. Fowler was complaining of all the moving around, then began to realize what was happening. "Hey, it's you again," he shouted. Stillknight waited patiently to see if the troops would move on their own. They did not, and another group approached from the rear. "Where are we? Last I remember I was flying back from Prime's base," Fowler said. Now surrounded, Stillknight saw no other way but to fight. As a result, she decided the most direct route to an exit, and chose to take the right at the Y before dropping her cloak. The troopers had been standing, waiting for an intruder to present itself, then suddenly were faced with darkness. They tried their comms, but there was no answer. Something was interfering with communications, and had turned out the lights. She walked toward them unarmed. Then they opened fire. In a swift movement, Stillknight removed the blaze from her back and began running. "What are you— Ah!" Fowler shouted as Stillknight ran at the troops. With ease, Stillknight took the troopers down. She turned her cloak back on and took flight. "Ratchet, where do you think we've been?" Bulkhead said, exasperated. We know we're low on energon. We just need to keep searching and keep an eye out for con mining ops. Ratchet opened his mouth to respond, but froze. His optics widened as he stared over Bulkhead's shoulder. Intruder! He barked. Weapons were instantly drawn. RC turned, her optics narrowing. You again, RC said. Stillknight stood just inside the base, cloak removed, motionless and calm. Is this, Ratchet started, the Knight? Jack stepped forward. Yeah, that's her, Jack said. RC and the others slowly lowered their weapons. Ratchet didn't. How did you find our base? And how did you get in here? He asked. Stillknight didn't answer. Instead, her chest plating shifted, revealing a figure. Special Agent Fowler? Ratchet gasped as she handed him over. That's right, Fowler groaned. Old Stillknight here pulled my tailpipe out of trouble again. Decepticons? RC asked. That's right. Ambushed me before I could even let Uncle Sam know I'd be late for dinner, Fowler replied. You said Stillknight? Asked Jack, interested. Fowler turned to Jack. Yeah, the Docbot said that was her name. Stillknight, Knight of the Temple. So you do think you're a knight then, Ratchet said disbelievingly. Stillknight looked at him and remembered her early skepticism learning the ways of the knights. She then turned to leave. Wait a moment. You can't just leave knowing the location of our base. We need to tell Optimus, Ratchet exclaimed. Ratchet, she saw you all move in last year. She just hadn't dropped by, Fowler responded. Been keeping an eye on all of us from the shadows. Creep-y, said Miko. She's not here to look in the windows, Miko. Just trying to keep the cons off our backs when needed, as it was today, matter of fact, Fowler said. Stillknight continued to leave. As she attempted to do so, Ratchet stood in front of her to block her path. Ratchet? RC asked in a warning tone. I don't trust someone who just walks into our base and thinks they can just walk out. We need to wait for Optimus. How can we be certain she won't tell the Decepticons where our base is? Stillknight understood his caution, and it made sense, although she had just come from the warship itself and managed to keep her mouth shut. Ratchet, we just came from the Khan's warship. I think if she wanted them to know where your base was, that would have been a convenient time to have divulged the information, Fowler said. You came from the Decepticon warship? Ratchet asked, awestruck. That's right. Like I said, Decepticon ambush, knocked me out, and dragged me to their ship to seek information, Fowler responded. Stillknight here showed up and very discreetly removed me from the ship. I don't think they ever saw her, actually. Ratchet and the others processed that information for a moment, until the towering footsteps of another Cybertronian could be heard at the base's entrance. Optimus! We have something of an intruder, Ratchet said, motioning at Stillknight. More of a guest, really, Fowler corrected. She is a Knight of the Temple, Optimus, Jack said. She goes by Stillknight. Optimus took in the scene with quiet precision. Stillknight, welcome to Autobot Outpost Omega-1. If you are injured, our medic can assist. And on behalf of all of us, our apologies for the misunderstanding, Optimus said. Ratchet muttered something to himself and shifted uneasily. Stillknight looked from the Prime to the medic and back. I do have one request, Optimus added. I have been searching for more information on the Knights of the Temple. There is little more than myth and exaggeration in the records that remain. But one account is consistent, that the Knights have a semi-sentient armor that bonds to them. They form a sort of symbiotic relationship, and their weapons cannot be wielded by others. Would you allow us a demonstration? Stillknight considered what he said. Because it was still Ratchet that was nearest her, she removed an orange glowing blade from her back and placed it through the floor in front of him. She then stepped back and offered out her hand, motioning for him to attempt to grasp the weapon. After first looking from Optimus to Stillknight, Ratchet bent to grasp it. The blade went from glowing orange to a dull bronze color. It also became quite fixed to the earth. Ratchet tried harder to raise it and was unable. He stepped back and said, This proves nothing. The Knights of the Temple have many myths around them. This may be the most plausible of them all. Bulkhead and Bumblebee had already stepped forward to try to lift it. First Bumblebee tried, then when he was unable to, Bulkhead did. Bulkhead succeeded in cracking the floor beneath his feet, but he could not lift the blade. Stillknight then approached the blade when they were finished. As she reached out to grasp it, it glowed brightly once again and entered her hand on its own in one soft swoop. The glowing blade was pulsing gently and harmoniously with Stillknight's spark. It was as though the presence of the armor soothed her, and she it. With care and appreciation, Stillknight placed the blade back into its holster to join the other on her back. "Suppose that's proof enough," Bulkhead said. "Thank you, Stillknight. It is an honor to meet a true Knight of the Temple," Optimus said. Stillknight nodded, then turned to leave. "Stillknight!" Jack shouted. Then, after she turned, he turned rather red in the cheeks. It was good to see you again." Stillknight looked at him thoughtfully. She then walked over to him and removed the wrist controller from her wrist. She transformed it into a smaller shape, then offered it to him. When he took it, Stillknight motioned for him to place it onto his wrist. Jack did so, then mimicking Stillknight, tapped it once. He then said, "I don't understand." And through Stillknight's communication system, the voice could be heard. "I don't understand." "Oh," Jack exclaimed, "that's pretty handy. Thank you." Stillknight nodded, then tapped her own wrist 3 times, signaling him to do the same. When he did so, her forearm flashed. She lifted her forearm, and a holographic image of both Jack and his coordinates was visible, showing an SOS. "Yeah, maybe those should be issued to all of us," Fowler muttered, "for safety purposes and all." Stillknight looked at him, then turned to leave. This time, no one stopped her.